It is approximately 9,000 years ago, somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, and things at this particular campsite are getting genuinely out of hand. Not dangerous out of hand, not violent or destructive, just louder than they were 2 hours ago. Significantly louder. The fire is larger than strictly necessary for warmth. Someone has been drumming for what feels like a very long time and shows no signs of stopping. 3 or 4 people are doing something that could charitably be described as dancing, with varying degrees of coordination that correlates inversely with how long they have been at this particular gathering. The story being told by the most animated member of the group has been going for 20 minutes, has involved multiple character voices, and has produced at least 4 genuine eruptions of communal laughter. And in the clay vessels near the fire, the ones that were full of something grain-based and water-based and time-based about 4 days ago, there is considerably less liquid than there was at sunset. This is ancient nightlife. And before you say anything, yes, it counted. It absolutely counted. The question of what ancient humans actually did at night is one that most people think they already know the answer to. They slept, they stayed by the fire, trying not to die, they waited for morning. This answer is both partially correct and dramatically incomplete, because the evidence, archaeological, anthropological, biological, and chemical, tells us that ancient nights were not just the pause between productive days. They were events. They were the center of ancient social life. They were when the real human stuff happened. And sometimes, ancient humans partied. Let's start with the fermentation evidence, because it is one of the most extraordinary and most underreported stories in all of ancient human history. In 2018, researchers excavating a site called Rakefet Cave in Israel, associated with the Natufian culture, a semi-sedentary hunter-gatherer people who predated agriculture in the Levant by several thousand years, found something remarkable. Inside 3 stone mortars carved into the cave bedding, they found the chemical signatures of a brewing operation, starchy plant residues in patterns consistent with the soaking, germination, and fermentation of cereal grains. The residues dated to approximately 13,000 years ago. 13,000 years ago. Before agriculture. Before settled villages, before any of the civilizational developments that people typically associate with the production of alcoholic beverages. Ancient people who were still primarily mobile hunter-gatherers were specifically producing fermented grain beverages in carved stone mortars. The Rakefet Cave finding is not an anomaly. It fits within a larger pattern of evidence that collectively tells a story that has significant implications for how we understand ancient human social life. The evidence for ancient alcohol production has been pushed back further with each decade of archaeological chemistry research, and the cumulative picture is one of a species that discovered fermentation very early, recognized its specific effects on human experience, and incorporated fermented beverages into its social and ritual life long before the agricultural surplus that most histories of alcohol begin with. The anthropologist Patrick McGovern, who has been called the Indiana Jones of ancient alcohol and who has absolutely earned that title, has spent decades analyzing chemical residues in ancient vessels from sites across the world. His findings consistently document the presence of fermented beverages in ancient contexts going back thousands of years, using a range of fermentable materials including grain, fruit, honey, and various plant combinations that produce beverages with specific pharmacological effects. What this means for the ancient night picture is straightforward. Ancient humans had alcohol. Not reliably, not in unlimited supply, not as a daily background consumption, but as a specific, valued, periodically produced substance that was consumed at specific occasions, the same communal gatherings where storytelling and music happened, and that altered the quality of those occasions in ways that were immediately recognizable as pleasurable and socially significant. Let's talk about what alcohol specifically does to the ancient social gathering context because the pharmacology matters. Alcohol is a GABA receptor agonist and a glutamate receptor antagonist. It reduces neural inhibition and decreases excitatory transmission in ways that produce, at moderate doses, specific social effects: reduced social anxiety, increased talkativeness, heightened emotional expressiveness, greater willingness to participate in communal activities, and the specific quality of social lubrication that makes interactions between people, including people with complicated histories or ongoing tensions, smoother and more enjoyable. In the small group, high-stakes social world of ancient community life, where navigating interpersonal dynamics required careful management, and where social tension between community members had direct implications for collective survival, a substance that selectively reduced social anxiety and promoted positive communal interaction had genuinely functional value. This is not a rationalization of ancient drinking. It is the identification of a specific social mechanism that alcohol activates and that has genuine group cohesion benefits when managed appropriately. The specific occasions on which alcohol was produced and consumed in ancient contexts, from the evidence of both traditional societies and early historical records, were consistently communal rather than individual. Not private consumption for personal relaxation, but shared consumption at communal gatherings, typically with ceremonial framing that marked the occasion as significant. The ale was not just a drink. It was a social technology for the management of communal occasions in ways that promoted bonding, reduced tension, and created the specific emotional climate in which human community cohesion was maintained and strengthened. And the ancient humans who gathered around a fire at night with fermented grain beverages, with drums, with the specific social energy of a communal occasion that had been building through the day, those ancient humans were not having a lesser experience of communal celebration than any modern equivalent. They were having the same fundamental experience that every human culture that has ever existed has had. The specific pleasure of being in a group of people you know, with your social inhibitions selectively reduced by a mild intoxicant, making noise together in the dark. Let's talk about the other psychoactive substances that may have been part of ancient nightlife, because fermented beverages were not the only chemistry in the ancient social pharmacopoeia. Cannabis, whose psychoactive use in Central Asian ancient contexts is chemically documented to at least 2,500 years ago, with almost certainly much earlier origins, was almost certainly present at some ancient social gatherings. The specific social effects of cannabis, the amplification of sensory experience, the enhancement of music perception, the specific social warmth that low-dose cannabis produces, are functionally compatible with the communal social context of ancient night gatherings in ways that make its incorporation into ancient nightlife events entirely plausible. Various fermented beverages containing psychoactive compounds beyond simple alcohol, including the possible ancient beverages containing various herbal additions documented in multiple archaeological contexts, expanded the specific pharmacological range of ancient communal occasions. The mead-like beverages documented in some ancient contexts included various plant additions whose pharmacological properties were almost certainly known and intentionally incorporated. The archaeological record of specific vessels associated with communal consumption events. Larger vessels suggesting shared drinking rather than individual consumption, specific vessel types associated with ceremonial contexts, the distribution of cups and drinking implements at sites suggesting organized communal serving. All point toward ancient social occasions at which shared consumption of pharmacologically significant beverages was a structured and intentional element of the event. This is not ancient substance abuse. It is ancient social chemistry, the specific, culturally managed use of substances that alter consciousness in specific ways to serve specific social functions, embedded in ritual and cultural frameworks that both maximize the benefits and manage the risks. Every subsequent human culture that has managed communal intoxicant use effectively has reinvented the same basic framework: communal rather than individual consumption, specific occasions rather than constant availability, social norms governing acceptable behavior under intoxication, and the specific function of promoting bonding and reducing tension in service of community cohesion. Now let's talk about what else was happening on these ancient nights, because alcohol and other substances were one element of a richer package of activities that made ancient night a distinct cultural zone. Music was not background ambiance at ancient communal events. It was central. The bone flutes, the percussion instruments, the communal singing documented in every traditional culture. These were the core technology of ancient communal occasions. The primary mechanism through which the group's shared emotional state was elevated and unified. And here is something important about what music does to a group of people who have been drinking. It works better, or at least differently. The specific neurochemical effects of moderate alcohol consumption, reduced inhibition, heightened emotionality, increased social engagement, interact with the neurochemical effects of rhythmic music in ways that amplify both. The endorphin release of communal music making, combined with the GABA activation of alcohol, produces a specific neurochemical cocktail that generates intense communal positive affect. This is why music and alcohol have been paired in human social events since the earliest evidence of both. They work together. The specific physical activity that this combination tends to produce, rhythmic movement, which is to say dancing, was almost certainly a major component of ancient communal night events. Dance is documented in every human culture, requires no materials beyond willing bodies and a rhythm to move to, and produces its own neurochemical effects through the endorphin release of sustained physical activity and the social synchrony of moving in coordination with others. An ancient communal event at its height, the fire burning, the drums going, the group singing, people moving to the rhythm, beverages being shared, was a full sensory and neurochemical experience of significant intensity. It was not primitive. It was not a pale shadow of modern celebration. It was the specific human experience of communal joy, generated through exactly the mechanisms that human biology is specifically designed to respond to, in exactly the social context that gives those mechanisms their maximum effect. Let's talk about storytelling in the night context, because this is where ancient nightlife connected its recreational dimension to its most serious functions. The storytelling documented by Polly Wiesner in traditional communities was concentrated specifically in the evening hours, after the day's practical work was done and after the communal gathering had settled into its evening social mode. And the storytelling that happened in this context was qualitatively different from daytime practical communication, richer in character and narrative, more explicitly concerned with meaning and values, more emotionally engaging, more willing to venture into the imaginative and the fantastical. A communal gathering with fermented beverages, with music and movement, with the specific social warmth that these combined elements produced, that was an extraordinarily fertile environment for storytelling. The reduced inhibition that alcohol produced made storytellers more willing to take risks with their material, to go further into the emotionally complex territory that the best stories inhabit. The heightened emotional responsiveness of the audience made the stories land harder, produce stronger reactions, create more vivid collective experience. The stories told at ancient communal night events were almost certainly some of the most important cultural productions in ancient human history. These were the events at which the community's foundational narratives, the stories about where they came from, who they were, what they believed about the world, what their obligations to each other and to the more than human world were told and retold with the specific emotional charge that communal celebration produces. These were the events at which cultural memory was most powerfully transmitted, most deeply imprinted, most effectively preserved against the entropy of forgetting. The oldest myths, the foundational stories of every culture that eventually produced written records, are almost certainly the survivors of oral traditions that began in exactly this kind of context, told at night, at communal gatherings, by skilled storytellers, to audiences in the specific heightened state of attention and emotional openness that ancient nightlife produced. Let's talk about the social function of ancient nightlife in more specific terms, because while it is satisfying to describe ancient parties on their own terms, the broader social functions they served deserve explicit examination. Ancient communities existed under constant social pressure. 20 to 30 people living in close constant proximity, sharing resources under variable and sometimes extreme conditions, navigating the inevitable frictions of personalities, of relationship dynamics, of resource competition, of the specific interpersonal tensions that high interdependence community life generates. Those communities needed regular mechanisms for social reset, for the discharge of accumulated tension, the reaffirmation of shared identity, the maintenance of the communal emotional bonds that made cooperation possible. Communal night events, with their music, their movement, their shared consumption, their storytelling, their specific neurochemical atmosphere of reduced inhibition and heightened social warmth, were that mechanism. They were not incidental to the functioning of ancient communities. They were essential. They were the specific social technology through which communities that lived at the edge of their social capacity for cohesion maintained that cohesion across the long stretches of daily practical challenge. This is why every human culture that has ever existed has some form of communal celebration. Not because celebration is a luxury that wealthy cultures can afford, but because it is a necessity that all human communities require for the maintenance of social cohesion. The specific forms vary enormously. The underlying social function is universal, and the ancient fire circle with its beverages and its drums and its stories and its dancing was simply the most elemental form of a practice that has been continuously present in human life ever since. Let's talk about who these ancient gatherings included and what the social dynamics were, because the composition of ancient night events matters for understanding their social function. Ancient nightlife was not age-segregated. Children, adults, and elders were all present at communal evening gatherings, at least in the early portions of the evening. The specific energy of the occasion shifted as the night progressed. Children fell asleep. The gathering became more adult in its dynamics as the hours moved later. But the early evening communal event included the full range of community membership. This multi-generational presence served specific functions. For children, the communal evening was the context of knowledge transmission we have discussed. The stories, the demonstrations, the ambient absorption of community culture that childhood embedded in adult life provided. For adults, the presence of children and elders grounded the social occasion in its community context. These were not escapes from community responsibility, but expressions of it, celebrations of the specific community whose members were gathered. The elders who were present at ancient communal evenings were not passive observers. They were typically the primary storytellers, the keepers of the narrative knowledge that the community most needed to preserve, the individuals whose accumulated wisdom and experience gave the evening's knowledge transmission its deepest content. An elder telling stories at a communal fire, with the specific social amplification that a communal occasion produced, was the most powerful knowledge transmission event available in the ancient world. Gender dynamics at ancient communal events were almost certainly different from the gender-segregated nightlife that many historical cultures eventually produced. In small, egalitarian, face-to-face communities, the communal evening was a community event that included everyone: men, women, children, elders, in a shared social space where the normal social divisions of daily labor did not structure participation. The specific egalitarianism of the communal night event may have been one of its most important social functions, the creation of a space in which the entire community was present as a community, across whatever divisions the practical organization of daily life created. Let's address the most common question that the ancient nightlife topic raises, which is, how often did this actually happen? The archaeological evidence and the comparative anthropological evidence both suggest that full communal gatherings, the events with significant musical activity, with shared consumption, with the specific intensity of a communal celebration, were not daily occurrences. They were periodic, triggered by specific occasions, successful major hunts that produced surplus food and provided both the caloric resources for a celebration and the specific celebratory context that a major hunting success created. Seasonal events that marked specific points in the ecological calendar. The gatherings of multiple bands at seasonal aggregation events that brought together communities from a wide geographic area. Ceremonies marking specific life transitions within the community. Daily night activity was somewhat more modest. The regular evening social gathering with storytelling and music in their ordinary, non-celebratory forms, without necessarily the specific intensity of a full communal celebration. Think of it as the difference between an ordinary Tuesday evening and a Saturday night party. Both involve the same basic space and some of the same activities, but the intensity, the specific social investment, and the pharmacological dimension are different. The periodic full celebrations were probably more frequent than the equivalent modern events for specific reasons. The structure of ancient life created more collective success events, more shared hunts, more shared foraging surpluses, more occasions when the community had direct reason to celebrate together. And the social need for regular communal reset was more urgent in the high-intensity, high-interdependence context of ancient community life. Here is the full picture of ancient night in its most vivid form. It is some point in the deep, ancient past. Enough of the day's work has been successful that there is food in abundance tonight, more than the group strictly needs. Enough that no one needs to be cautious about how much they consume. Someone started the fermentation process 4 days ago, which means the vessels near the fire contain something that works. The drums came out earlier than usual. The fire is larger than it needs to be. This is a night that the group has known, from the moment the hunt succeeded, was going to be a specific kind of night. People who were working separately during the day are now all here. The children who should be asleep are negotiating their bedtime with increasing ineffectiveness. The elder who knows the best versions of the stories the community most wants to hear tonight is sitting in the prime storytelling position and has the specific alert quality about them that signals they have something good. Someone is already moving to the drum's rhythm. The vessels are being passed. This is recognizable. This is the thing that humans do when things have gone well, and the community is together, and the night is ahead of them, and there is something to share and someone to tell a story and a rhythm to move to. This is ancient. This is not accidentally similar to every communal celebration that humans have held in every culture, in every era since. It is the original, the template, the thing that all the subsequent versions are variations on. Ancient humans didn't just survive their nights, they filled them with the specific, irreplaceable human experience of being in a community of people you know, with your collective guard lowered just enough for genuine human warmth to come through, making noise and sharing stories and moving your body to a beat that someone else is keeping for you. They did this thoroughly, joyfully, with evident skill and evident enthusiasm. And honestly, good for them.